There is perhaps no greater change that you and I have experienced than going from occasional meetings online, some video conferences, and sometimes collaborating, into doing it all day, every day. This presentation is going to help you understand some of the key challenges that we face and why, and then what we can do to make more effective meetings online and collaborate in virtual environments. Now, a little bit about my history. I started in project management in 1978 at Southwestern Bell, which is now AT&T. So I've been on the owner side of the equation, I've been on the manufacturer side, I've been a subcontractor, and for the last 12 years I've been consulting. And a majority of my work today is still working with large, complex capital projects and working on the team side of the equation. Early, collaborative, trust-based teams is what I focus on. Today I'm going to focus on 7 key areas that will help you collaborate better in virtual environments. The first one is we've got to embrace this change. This is a permanent change that's taking place. We're not going to work every day, all day, forever in this environment, but this is going to be a new normal. Second, we need to upgrade our equipment. This is the new professional environment, and most of us are still working with the equipment that came in our computers, the cameras and the sound. We have to master basics. We have to understand the differences between the platforms and understand how to present ourselves within a virtual medium. Working remotely has some new health risks that we need to understand, and we need to have the right office set up, and we also need to practice healthy habits. One of the biggest changes for me has been to learn that I need to prepare more, almost like a production effort when I do either a webinar or a virtual meeting. I have to consistently remember the tool that I'm using and what the limitations of the tool are and what it does best. And finally, this is not a one-size-fits-all tool. We need additional tools, so I'll talk about the toolkit that we'll need to be effective in this new environment as well. So as we begin to look at the trends, what we see is the growth has been nothing short of astonishing since the beginning of the year. From 10 million users to more than 300 million users for Zoom, and then from 13 million users up to over 70 million users for Microsoft Teams. So it is the new norm, and you have to keep up with these platforms almost on a weekly basis because of the new features and the changes that they continuously make. Several of my clients are asking about what the future might look like, how much of their workforce might work almost permanently as remote employees. And here you can see a financial benefit to companies that do move more to remote work. Kate Lister's organization, Global Workplace Analytics, shows that companies can save as much as $11,000 per employee per year by switching to remote work. And in March, Google gave their employees $1,000 to upgrade their home offices, anticipating more and more of them would be working remotely. Now, my organization has been warning that it's too soon to tell whether or not this is going to be a broad-based trend of permanent remote work, or if we're going to have some more fluid form of hybrid. We're already beginning to see pushback, and we're also beginning to see some new health risks because of the remote work. We're in what I call the honeymoon phase of going through this rapid shock and shift to remote work, where we've done heroic efforts in terms of ramping up into this new mode. But the real question is how sustainable and how effective will it be in the long term? And we can begin to look at educational institutions as being ahead of the curve, and the future might look like something at Harvard Business School. You can see their virtual online learning. You see an image of each student, and each student has a camera, and that camera is picking up on body language, whether that student wants to say something or whether or not they're checking out. So just imagine in the future that you're in a meeting and the camera is going to tell everybody whether you're falling asleep or whether you're paying attention or not. That could be a very interesting future for all of us. So we really need to begin with the basics, and the basics begin with your equipment. Think about some of the conferences that you've been on where the sound has been scratchy, or the lighting has been blurry, or the person sitting next to a window and it's blocking them out, or you're seeing half of their head. All of those things are problems and detract from the ability to have effective collaborative efforts together. Now, the equipment doesn't have to be very expensive. You can get very good microphones for under $25 on Amazon. You can get an augmented Logitech camera for your setup. You can go online and watch some YouTube videos on how to set up the lighting in your room. And again, lighting, sound, and camera are the three most important things that provide a quality experience for the other person on the other side of your camera. One of the things we don't look at is the internet connection. I'm not using my Wi-Fi. I'm using a LAN connection. I've got consistent high-speed internet, so I don't have the normal kind of disruptions that we've all experienced in these conferences. You'll want to be looking into the camera at eye level. You don't want to be down low or up high looking down at the camera. All of that is very annoying and irritating when you're on the receiving end. Finally, the background is also very important. It either enhances or is a distraction to those watching. And please don't become clever and use some of those virtual environments unless you've got very good cameras and green screen, because what happens is when you move with the fake green screen enhancements, your body tends to go in and out and it blurs. So it becomes another form of distraction. A simple, clean background is the best you can do. I've blurred my background out, so you're totally focused on me and the lighting focuses on me, so you're not getting any kind of distractions as I'm presenting to you. When I first moved in this direction, I was a lot like you. I was just using my regular equipment and wanted to know how I could improve at a very low cost. So I worked with a young millennial. His name is Luke Asper with Asper Studios, and he came and showed me how I could create a small mini studio with just my iPhone. But as I saw that more and more of my business needed to be in this environment, I upgraded, and I will share a link with you on the videos that took us through each of the different stages from iPhone to small camera to full DSLR. I will also provide a link to Asper Studios, and on his site, he has a special area that looks at different kinds of studio setups, and they have all the equipment and the cost, and he's actually got one that shows my equipment. And so we'll show you all of that, and I'll provide links so that you can follow up. But again, there's a lot of information on the internet for you that will help you create an improved experience. Not only you will feel better, but it'll make it easier for everybody that you meet with as well. Another big problem with virtual collaboration is just how meetings are run. They're very impromptu. People come in late. People are trying to get their equipment set up. Sound isn't right. Microphones are muted or they're on. You hear background noise. All of this is a major distraction, is a major problem in how we conduct meetings. So we're going to walk through some of the things to tighten this up, and that you can actually help people prepare ahead of time so that when they come in, you're ready to start and you don't have what I call those muddy starts. One of the challenges and temptations with virtual meetings is multitasking. I find myself, if the meeting is not really clear as to what we're going to accomplish and what my role is, I'll have a tendency to check my emails or to multitask, which means I'm really not being an effective participant. So we'll talk about how to prepare people properly so everyone is focused on the meeting and not tempted to do multitasking. Finally, another area that's a real irritation are those awkward pauses and the cross-talking that goes when an open-ended question is thrown out and people are wondering, do I speak or not speak, or I try to speak and I back up. That's really awkward. So again, I'll have some suggestions for you and some best practices on how to manage that as well. One of my big ahas was just how much stress these virtual meetings put on your body. I actually measure those. I have two devices that I use for measuring. One is the Oura Ring, the other is the Whoop. These are high-performance health sensors, and what they really measure is how much sleep and recovery you get during the day, and then how much stress and strain. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side is a screenshot of my Oura Ring. I measured a 2-hour workshop as though it were a sports event. I burned 688 calories during that time. And in some of the research we've been doing on the health sides of this whole pandemic in terms of the stress and now all this virtual work and the thing that we know as Zoom fatigue, I reached out to Dr. Jernigan. Now, what we do know is the brain is the most calorie-consuming organ in the body. It consumes normally about 28% of your calories, but in this environment, it can consume more than 40% of your total calorie intake for a day. That is huge. So if you've been in some of these back-to-back meetings and at the end of the day you feel absolutely wiped out, this is why. You've been burning a high amount of calories, but they're not healthy calories. These are stress calories, and you don't have the benefit of working them off through exercise or doing what we call mindful breathing. It's also very important to have a healthy setup, to have good ergonomic equipment, to have sit-to-stand desk. I'm currently at my stand-up desk. I have a Very desk. There's lots of different kinds and brands out there, but I adjust it, and my devices tell me when I need to stand up or when I need to move. It's vital that you stay aware of this because it's very easy to get consumed in these meetings back to back to back. In fact, I recommend that we only have 45-minute periods that we're in conference or in meeting with a good solid 10 to 15-minute true break. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So let me talk a little bit about this stress and strain so that you know a little bit about how the body responds to stress on the system. Part of your body that's responding to this is called the autonomic nervous system. It controls all the automatic functions in your body, your heart rate, your breathing, all of these vital areas. And one of the things it controls is that on switch, the fight, flight, perform. When you're on, we're burning more calories because we have to do more work. We don't have the additional communication cues that we get with nonverbal communication and just in the energy of people interacting back and forth. There's nothing spontaneous in this new environment, so it is more work. And that happens through what's called the autonomic nervous system, which releases cortisol in your body, which is the on switch, and that's what creates the stress inside your body. Now again, unless you work this off, what happens is that at the end of the day, your body looks to cope with all this stress in your system. So it can lead to some very unhealthy coping behaviors and also interrupt your sleep. One of the areas that I coach people in remote work is around sleep. So there's another side to the autonomic nervous system too. The two sides are the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is that on switch. That's where the cortisol gets released in the body and you're in that fight, flight, or perform mode. And we see that in the red, jagged red lines that you're looking at in this chart. On the right-hand side, you see those smooth lines, and that's the parasympathetic. That's the rest and digest side of the equation. And we need to get a good balance between the two. The challenge is that we're spending most of our day in that agitated, cortisol engaged mode, and we're not getting proper rest. So again, one of the things that I recommend is we don't go beyond 45 minutes in a very engaged kind of virtual meeting, and we take true breaks throughout the day. But the most important place of rest is in sleep. So if you go through the day and you don't release all the cortisol that builds up in your system, you can reach for unhealthy coping behaviors in the evening. Eating comfort food, overuse of drugs or alcohol, lack of physical activity, and smoking. Those are 4 of the key unhealthy coping behaviors that our body naturally goes to deal with stress. And then it interferes with sleep. The number one recovery mode that we have is sleep. So I'm bringing that in because of the additional strain that we're experiencing in remote work and encouraging everybody to double down on their sleep, consistent sleep, and getting more than 7 hours in the bed every night. Now, if you're wondering why I'm emphasizing this, first of all, before all of this happened with COVID-19 being thrust into this new environment where we're already stressed out, more than 70% of Americans were not getting enough sleep to begin with. We are a sleep-deprived nation. That leads to safety challenges on the construction site, but more importantly, it diminishes our ability to have work and it hurts our health long term. One of my executive clients bragged that he only needed 5 hours of sleep a night. And I just laughed at him and I told him, "You're nuts. That's not true." I told him that if you're getting less than 5 hours of sleep, you're legally drunk in terms of how your brain is functioning. And in that same conversation, he shared with me that he bought a brand new Cadillac. One of the reasons he bought this Cadillac is it had special sensors that look at your eyes, and if you begin to nod off, the car will shake you to wake up. So I replayed with him what he just told me about only needing 5 hours of sleep and then buying this Cadillac. So in general, we wear lack of sleep like a badge of honor, but we should change how we recognize and how we promote and how we encourage and coach our employees. Sleep is the number one area for high performance on a day-to-day basis. It's the number one habit for improved health, and we're currently going through times where that is compromised. So we need to really reinforce it. There's 2 books that I recommend: Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker and Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevens. The Matthew Walker book really goes into a lot of the science, and it's very interesting. The Sleep Smarter is more of a how-to, and it'll be a really great primer for you. So all of this helps us get ready to design an effective virtual collaboration session. One of the most important things to remember is that this is simply a tool. Just like a hammer, if all you think about and all you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. Or in a current time when all we're doing are virtual meetings, we tend to think that this has to solve all the problems, and it doesn't. So let's look at what this environment, this virtual environment, does very well, and then let's look at what it doesn't do well, and that'll help us when we design our times together. So let's take a look at what this tool does extremely well. First of all, it's a great learning environment. It's a great way to put together presentations in pictures, in text, in graphs, and present information in a very interesting and compelling way. It's also a great way to share and exchange information back and forth. Another great use of this tool is for me or a presenter to get feedback, for me to present some information, and either through chat or breakout rooms or just questions and answers to get feedback on the content. Virtual environments are used very effectively for linear problem solving. You've got teams in different areas, and the problems that are structured, that we have known outcomes for, it's a great way to bring that knowledge together and to solve problems in a very efficient and effective way. Finally, that leads to things like production flow. There's a couple projects I'm working on right now where, because we cannot get into the big room and do what we typically do, which is pull planning using our Post-it notes, we've been able to do that very effectively in a virtual environment using additional tools like TouchPlan. Again, the nature of these kinds of experiences are they're information driven, they're linear. In other words, they flow in a predictable progression, and they produce tangible outcomes. Now, one of the areas that this is a very difficult environment to facilitate are hard conversations or conversations that may have some conflict involved in it. One of the reasons is this is a very literal environment. It's almost like going into a courtroom. It shines the spotlight and it magnifies the differences or the flaws that you're looking at. And with that, it's also very hard to have people openly share what they really think and feel about a topic. Again, this is an awkward environment, and you need some nuance and flow and some breathing room for people to feel comfortable to open up. When you're trying to move into an uncomfortable conversation or get people to share and be vulnerable, it almost takes a warm-up or priming the pump to get there. And again, this is a challenging environment to do that. We've developed some tools that help you do that, some templated conversations that help you move easily into something that's more open or conflict-oriented. Once you get beyond 6 to 8 people, it becomes a very difficult environment to have participation. It's awkward to know when to talk. There can be long pauses. So if you're the facilitator, one of the things we recommend is you just call on people, but they need to be prepared ahead of time. And people typically tend to just shut down and be quiet if they don't have the cues they need to know when or how to speak up. Finally, this is not a very good environment for complex or subtle kinds of conversations. For example, if you're making a major shift in policy, that's the kind of thing that you share, people absorb a little bit, and then they have to respond or react to. Again, this environment is very difficult for that kind of conversation to flow well. So it tends to be just an information or a one-way exchange, and you really don't get the feedback, or you don't get to hear where people are at or what they're thinking or how they're trying to apply this new information. This now leads us into talking about how do we design effective meetings together. The first thing that you'll have to get used to is it really takes more front-end prep time. Think of this almost like a movie production or some kind of an event production, that you have to think through all the different parts of it before you actually do it. And there needs to be practice as well. When you have a session and you have a start time, start strong. Have a definitive start, a statement, a question. But whatever you do, don't start with a rolling start and say, how's everybody doing? Let's see who's checking in. Oh, hey, Joe, how are you doing? That sets the tone already for a very difficult time of having a quality or in-depth conversation. To have an effective virtual session, you need some support. You need a facilitator. If you're the host and you've got certain agenda items, you want to have somebody who is a facilitator to keep things moving, to recognize when somebody has something to say and bring them in. You also need someone to deal with the logistics and the equipment, somebody that people can go to if they're having problems, somebody who makes sure that it starts on time, that all the equipment's working, that preps people ahead of time on how to come in prepared. There are different roles that you need just to have a successful session like we're having today. If you're planning a session that's going to go for a couple hours, make sure you take a clear break somewhere in the 45-minute range. There's good brain science behind this. Your brain is working double time in this virtual environment. If a 90-minute session in a regular meeting is the maximum capacity that a brain can focus on without doing damage to it, then let's take this down to a 45-minute session with some really nice breaks in between so that the brain can recuperate. Your brain does not have nerve endings in it. Therefore, it does not feel pain when you're pushing or straining it beyond its capacity. But you are doing real damage to the brain when you force people to be focused for extended periods of time. We actually have a phrase for that. My brain is fried. At the end of every session, we should have clear next steps and then do a plus delta. Especially in these virtual environments, we have so much to learn and so much that we need feedback on to see if we're hitting the mark, if the tools we're using are being used by others, if the timing was good, if the topics were clear, if the participation was sufficient. All of those things we need consistent feedback, because the environment itself doesn't give us a lot of cues as to whether we're being successful or not. So I'd like to revisit that number one area, the prep time, thinking of it almost as a production. This is one of the big ahas for me. So in this production or preparation time, here are some things that you want to keep in mind. So if you're putting your producer or director hat on, here are some important things to consider. Number one, what type of meeting are you having? Is this an information exchange? Is this a problem-solving session? Is this a coordination time? Or are we trying to collaborate and work together to come up with a new idea or new solution or build deeper relationships in our collaboration efforts? The type of meeting will determine how people prepare. It'll determine how long you'll have it. Unless I know ahead of time what I'm coming to the meeting for, it'll be very hard for me to engage, and I'll likely just sit back. Now, this next feature should be part of any meeting in general. There's far too many meetings we participate in, and far too many times I walk away thinking, why was I even invited to this meeting? But even more so in the virtual environment, because the more people you have, the more challenging to have a quality conversation, the more you can design these meetings around those who really need to be there, who can contribute or need to take something away, the better you will be. Do your meetings have a clear outcome or goal that everybody knows ahead of time and everyone is prepared to contribute to? Perhaps the most overlooked area in having a collaborative or virtual session is that everybody plays a role. And this is where your producer or director hat comes on, thinking ahead of time of what role each person that you're going to invite to this meeting needs to play and how they need to prepare for it. One person's role may just be to get feedback or input from everybody before the agenda is created. One may be just to create the agenda. Another role may be just to make sure people have the right information so that when they come, they're ready to go. Another may make sure that the tools that we're using, the collaboration tools, maybe a Google Doc or some other kind of tool, is being used in this meeting. If I'm invited to a meeting and I don't have a particular reason why I should be there or know that there's a goal, or if there's not a specific role that they want me to play in that meeting, then I'm going to sit back and probably multitask, because it will be hard for me to be engaged and to anticipate how to be engaged unless I know those areas of my responsibility in this meeting. We are all very used to showing up to meetings without any preparation. It's just become the norm. But we can get away with a lot of that because there's context and history and a lot of back and forth conversations where we have a little bit of a preview of what we're coming into ahead of time. We have no preview this time, so we have to be more explicit with everybody and give everybody things to do so that they come prepared. Very simple things, but unless I have things that I'm explicitly preparing for, I'm going to come to the meeting and just sit because I don't have enough context to know how to anticipate and how to participate. Now, there are all kinds of tools being developed for this new virtual environment. I'm simply going to go through a few of the ones that I like to use and why I like to use them, but I would like to invite you to share with me some of the tools that you use. I won't go into Teams because most of you are already using Teams and know how to use it. One of the hacks that I learned early was to use a Google Doc or a Google Sheet as a companion to the meeting or the webinar that I host. I like to provide everybody the link ahead of time with an agenda and give them the opportunity to add things to the agenda if they would like. Then during the meeting, it's a great place for people to take notes, to fill in what we talked about, and it's all happening in real time in a collaborative way. At the end of the session, we have a nice artifact that works a lot better than just maintaining the chat dialogue in a Zoom call or within Teams. So now I'll move into some of the other tools and show you some images of what they look like. One is Hayworth's Bluescape, which I love to use, but it's not easy to get access to. Google's Jamboard is a nice ad hoc tool that I like to use. Mural's been around, but it has been greatly enhanced, and I found a lot of design firms like to plan and brainstorm and use this. I'll show you a few images of what those screens look like. I personally use Basecamp. A lot of people use Teams. Either one is a great place to have all the communication in one place, to keep track of communication strings. It's a great environment that brings everything together in one place. When I'm doing ad hoc to-do lists, and I want to make these to-do lists collaborative with what I might call on-the-fly teams, I like to use Workflowy. I'll show you an example of that as well. And then finally, one of my favorite tools is Evernote. You may use OneNote with Teams, but this is a one-place filing cabinet. The power of Evernote is the tagging, and I'll show you that as well. So let's take a look at the Bluescape. This is one of my colleagues using Bluescape. It's a very large life-size video display that is touchscreen. It allows you to write on it, but it also allows you to move things around. In this particular Bluescape, we have used PowerPoint as a post-it note kind of tool. So those color borders are like different color post-it notes, and these are a particular category. And we're rearranging these in a story form because I'm actually creating a book in this particular Bluescape. This is another version of taking analog cards and images and using them as post-it notes again. And here we're using a methodology called displayed thinking, developed by Disney, and using headers as categories and then the subcategories and then moving those around in terms of trying to consolidate and bring lots of information together and synthesize it. One of the great features of Bluescape is the ability to see things at a human scale. Your brain puts more connections together seeing things at this large scale than it does looking at small screens. It's one of the great values of it. But again, it's primarily used for large capital projects with coordination from around the globe. So companies like Boeing or Lockheed or companies coordinating teams around the globe, it's an incredible tool, and I'm happy to share more with you on this if this is something of interest to you. Here's a simple example of Jamboard. It's a Google tool. It is like a post-it note tool, and here I'm using it as a plus delta So we can have a plus delta for a meeting where everybody who is part of that meeting has a link to the Jamboard and can simply put post-it notes up that give their feedback on a plus delta for a meeting. And again, you can use it for lots of other purposes as well. Mural is another neat tool that I like because of the breadth of applications. One of the things that Mural will walk you through is helping you design the kind of tool support you need for the kind of meeting and the kind of structure of the teams you have. This is just one of the screens that has a template for who's participating in the meeting. Another template is to look at the kind of structure of the conversation that you're trying to have and look through how to set up that structure in a virtual environment. And then finally, we're looking at how people might interact with some of the different tools we have, either in real time, in asynchronous mode, in task organization and task assignment. So again, Mural has a lot of flexibility, and it's something that I think you'll want to look into. And it's something you can use simultaneously to a virtual session, either in Teams or in Zoom or any of the other virtual platforms you might be using. Now, my projects are far less complex than what you're probably doing, so I use Basecamp to organize not only my clients, but also the different consultant teams that I work with. And you can see here, this is just one of the groups called the Guild, and you can see some of the different areas that we can keep track of all of our communication together, all of our key documents. There are more features in here than I'm actually using. My teams are fairly simple in terms of the functions that we have together. I described Workflowy as one of the tools I like to use. And again, I can invite people to see what I see as well. This is simply a to-do list, a very flexible and easy to use and shareable to-do list. But I use this for on-the-fly or ad hoc efforts that I'm doing with individuals or very small teams. And finally, Evernote is my single source filing cabinet. I use it to do all my research for my books. On the far left-hand side is my file structure. I use the David Allen Getting Things Done, the GTD model, to organize all my work. All my proposals go in here. All my future projects go in here. All of my archives go in here. And here again, the magic of finding all of this, it's one place, but it's the tagging that I have, and it's the subject line titles that I use that allow me to find things very easily and seamlessly. So let's wrap up and review quickly the 7 keys to effective remote collaboration. First of all, let's embrace that this change is here. We're going to have to be good at it. We're going to have to be professional, and we need to invest some time to learn how to do that. Secondly, let's upgrade your equipment. If this is the environment we're going to be working in, it needs to be a quality kind of experience, not only for yourself, but for others as well. Now, number 3 is mastering the basics. And the basics are simple. We need to learn the different platforms and how to function in those platforms seamlessly, so we're not fumbling around at the beginning. We need to have our equipment ready to go, everything prepped. We need to be looking directly into the camera, not way down here like this looking up or looking down so that we're looking at somebody's nose. It's direct facing. Number 4, and another very important element, there's some new health risks in working this way that we're starting to see some articles show up in Wall Street Journal and in other areas. We've been tracking this for quite a while, and I really recommend that you double down on taking your breaks and making sure that you're getting quality sleep every night so that when you recover, you're ready for another day. Number 5 is the biggest shift I've had to make, and that is preparing ahead of time and practicing. Whether it's practicing a webinar, whether it's practicing going through all the elements of a meeting that we're going to handle, and working with the different kinds of roles or people, my logistics person and my facilitator, so we're all on the same page and everybody can experience a high quality and professional and effective use of time. Remember the kind of tool that virtual collaboration provides. It's a tool that has a limited range of things it does extremely well, a few things it does okay, and some areas that you never want to use it for, like trying to mediate conflict. The final area is building your supplemental toolkit, things that supplement the way you work. I shared with you some of my favorite tools. I'd love to learn from you some of the tools that you like to use as well. This has been an exciting, disruptive, and stressful time of change, but my company is a much better company because of this. We're learning new ways, and we're going to continue to learn the new kind of business model that really leverages this tool to its optimum. Thank you for taking the time, and we've been collecting your questions throughout the presentation, and I will answer some of them live, but I'll also follow up and answer those after we're finished as well. Thank you very much. If you need to get a hold of me for any reason, here's my email address. It's rex@rexmiller.com. If you'd like to find out more about the kind of work we do for capital projects or some of the research that's related to the built environment, you can go to my website, which is www.rexmiller.com. Thank you very much, and I look forward for us to follow up in conversation afterwards.